We are live. Hey everyone, it's Saturday morning and we are live. And I'm sure you guys saw that crazy picture.
I,
Mwah.
before we even get started, Renee showed me that picture last night, and I was like, "That looks crazy." People are going to be like, "What is she doing?" Because I'm full disclosure, I have nothing to do with it. That is all Renee, and she is the one that is actually creating all the graphics and all the stuff she does. You see, I have no input. I think I do sometimes, but I really don't. But we
We
glad.
have lanes. He has his lane, I have my lane,
Mhm.
and that part is my lane.
We're gonna talk about a topic today. We sorry we missed you guys last week,
Yeah, we missed you guys. Mwah. We missed you guys live last week.
but it was fun what we were doing. We were
Yes.
actually serving some other couples physically in our presence, through our
Yeah.
church, through some premarital stuff that we were working on at our church, which was
Our
fun.
church is Community Bible Church, and the program we're working through is called Merge. And we love them, and we're grateful to be able to serve in that capacity. And so, if you live in the San Antonio area, we can meet you in person.
Yeah.
But today is really a special day. We are going to talk about identity, and we're going to do a little bit different. You guys, please feel free to ask questions,
Put it in the
put
chat.
it
Put
in
it
the
in the chat
chat if
because
you
we
have
will.
questions. And if you're watching later, put your questions in the comments. But one of the things you guys know, I love Dear Future Wifey podcasts, and one of the things that I noticed that he talked about, and we're really big on being hot, honest, open, and transparent right here. Not just looking good, but really doing that. And I realized, we kind of say, oh, we'll share that at another time. We keep saying we'll share it at another time. And so, what we're going to do this week, we're going to talk about identity, but we're going to share our stories. So, Gil is going to ask me questions, and I'm going to answer.
This is gonna be a conversation,
So,
y'all.
this week, and then next week,
At
I'm
least
gonna
that's the plan. We just gonna say that's the plan.
No, that's the plan. The plan, and unless you guys have questions and stuff. But I just think it's important that you guys really have a real understanding of who we are and where we come from. And so, identity is a really important thing for me because I realize that we make so many things our identity and we identify with so many things. Especially as women, I think that we're mothers, we're wives, we're sisters, we're entrepreneurs, we're business owners, we're aunties, we're cousins. And so not men have those same roles too. But I think that for women, I think that we find our identity in our children and in the things that are really not designed to be our long-term identity. And so,
So let me ask you this. I'll just start it out. So we thank you guys for joining us on the
thank
Rich Relationship
you.
Morning Talk. Or I hope you got your coffee. So if you
Yep,
don't
we
have it,
got
go get
some.
it. Go
We
get
got
your
our coffee. We
coffee.
got our coffee.
Just sit back and just jump in if you want to jump in. Just listening. And really, what we always try to do is bring value to our community and to the subscribers, so you can actually take some of the things we're talking about and actually go and talk to your significant other.
Yes.
If you're married for a few years or a lot of years,
Or if you're just
or
dating
just
and
getting started, or
engaged.
even just dating and engaged.
Yes.
Because one thing that I realized last week when working with the premarital, these are people who are in the engagement or
Which are
dating
our
stage,
favorite. We love
and
engaged.
it's so refreshing because we've been doing this together, Renee and Gil, for 35
Yes.
years. And sometimes you can get that can even become your identity.
Yeah,
So
very much so.
when you are need some refreshment and some renewing and things like that, is you have to get around. And I'll talk a little bit about it later, some of the things that I've been thinking about and meditating on when it comes to this topic. Because
Of
when
identity.
you think about it, there is some things that we all struggle with. And
Mhm.
I'll ask Renee, this is the first question. Why do we struggle with identity?
I think we struggle with identity because, again, like most of the things that really matter, we're not really taught. And so I think sometimes we think, especially before we come to Christ, because before you come to the Lord, your identity can be, let's go back to as young as being a teenager. As a teenager, my identity was, I guess, what I wore,
Hmm.
what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of brands you wear, where do you get your clothes from? So when you're young, your identity can be in things, but then as you begin to mature and grow, and then your identity is a child, you're your parents' children. And so I think that our identity can be a struggle because we don't know the difference between what should be internal and what should be external.
Let me ask you this. So going back to the brand, that's pretty popular in this time we're in our
Hmm.
society. Everybody's always talking about brands and things like that. Why do you think people need a brand to feel validated
Well, I
or
think
as a to accept as a part of their identity?
I think because when you grow up without a lot, there are things that you see that you consider success, and you think that, well, if I could wear this, then that makes me in line with those people. And so you think that you can buy value and identity.
Mhm.
So you think that if you wear expensive clothes, it makes you more valuable. And I don't know about anybody else, but I know for me, when I look back on it now, you see people back then, we
Oh
didn't have
man,
social
you and
media.
them, I just had a flashback, y'all. Guess jeans.
Yes.
I know I'm dating
Before
myself.
Guess, it was Gloria
I'm
Vanderbilt.
dating myself. I don't know if people remember the jeans wars, the
Yeah.
blue jean war where you had to have a
Gloria
certain brand of
Vanderbilt.
all these certain brands of jeans that you had to
Jordache.
wear. Oh man.
Then
Why?
Levi's, Calvin Klein.
But you really didn't make it until you identify with Guess. That was like the top of the food chain at the
And
time
when we were
when
growing
we're from
up.
Detroit. I don't know. I know we have people watching from all over the place. So if
What was
you
yours? Tell
what
us in the chat what was
what
yours.
was your jean brand that you made it when you got this pair of jeans, and you styled them out or you wore them the way you wore them, whatever it was, but that brand with
I
the
think about
Guess.
that when you say that. I think when you're younger, it's like things like blue jeans.
Hmm.
You get a little bit older, maybe gym shoes, and a little bit older might be
Oh, it
purses and
was. It's sneakers now, yeah.
cars. And so I think so many times we can allow things that are external to become our identity. And I know for me, I go back to, like I said, when I was little, it was clothes. And then you start realizing you have all this stuff and you still feel empty inside.
But and you wrote something in the book that we have out, the Rich Relationship Workbook, but it was talking about you, and you can talk about it now. Appetites. I'll just say the word, and I know you can just take it from
Yeah,
there.
for me, I struggle with my weight. I started dieting when I was 11 years old. When I was 10, I weighed 110. So I have never been like a little tiny petite person. So for me, I began to realize, because another thing is that both of my parents were on drugs. So I grew up in an environment where lack and not having what you need was a part of my daily life. But they also were very driven by their appetite. So addiction is appetite driven. And so I realized that if once you start giving into your appetites, you got to have the shoes, and you got to have the purse, and you got to have the car. And so once you start living your life being led by your appetite becomes the standard.
Mm.
It becomes how you feel fulfilled. And I realized, especially when I started fasting, and your appetites can only lead you to a place that you're going to end up regretting,
Right.
because your appetites are insatiable. And so, your identity,
It's never enough.
it's never enough. And so when you find your identity being led by your appetites, it's going to lead you to being unfulfilled.
Right. And I think about the appetite thing, and I didn't have a big problem with food, but I had an issue with stuff. I like you said about we talked about already about the jeans, but you had to have the certain brand name,
Right.
whatever it was, whether let's just call it paraphernalia, because
Yeah.
that's all it was. Because whether it's jeans, shoes, clothes, cars, houses,
Hmm.
whatever stuff, you had to have that stuff to feel validated because you felt it brings you this identity because it makes you feel, I think, a void that has been left open. You're trying to put stuff in it.
Yeah. And
And
I remember
so
you said that. You said that one time. You're like, I used to do that when I was empty. And I think we live in a society where we don't realize, we don't stop and say, well, why do I need that? Well, why is that important to me? Well, why do I have to have that? Because if you don't ask yourself why, then you will be led by your appetites, because you won't be making a wise, well thought out decision.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just be, well, everybody else is doing it, so I have to do it too. And you have to really ask yourself, why, why do I have to have that? Why is that important to me? I think about in a time in our life when, because we've lived a lot of places. We've gone through it. Like I said, I grew up in a house where my parents were addicts. My mom got killed by a serial killer when I was
Young.
young. And so there's a lot of things that have happened to me that could have made me a different person.
That
And
tragedy can become your identity.
yeah, you can just identify, you can constantly keep identifying with what happened. I know right now everyone is very focused on you. I hear it all the time: trauma, 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 trauma. Our generation,
That was normal
what people consider, and it's not to
in this day and
undermine
time.
or
Yeah.
to diminish anyone's level of trauma, but there's severity, there's levels of severity of trauma. And I think that because we went through so much so early,
Mm-hmm.
it made us very, very resilient.
Right.
And so to me, if I had to say another thing that, like you said, you can identify with your trauma. You can feel more comfortable with identifying with the pain of your past than saying, okay, that was just something that happened
Mm-hmm.
through me. That's not who I am. And so, yeah, I had a bad childhood. Yeah, went without. I had to be an adult very early, but I wouldn't be who I am right now had I not gone through that. Did I feel like that when I was going through it? No, of course
Right.
not. But over the years of going through things and living life and realizing and being a very self-aware person, constantly evaluating myself, constantly asking questions, it makes you start asking, well, why? And I think the more you ask why, the more you can begin to realize the identity is not found in things.
And
It's not
stuff.
found in titles.
Right.
It's not found in accomplishments. It's not found in traveling. It's not found. It's in your identity has got to be in something that's bigger than you, that doesn't have a beginning and an end. And for me, that's Christ Jesus. And so I had to learn that I had to identify with
But
who
when
God
did
said I was.
but how long did it take for you to really identify that though? I mean,
Oh my gosh.
or what was the catalyst, or what was the thing that really drew you in to your relationship with Christ as being a fulfillment or fulfiller of the identity struggle?
Well, I think because after you buy everything and you go everywhere and you have everything and you still feel that emptiness inside of you, you begin to realize this is not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There must be more. You have that yearning inside of you. There must be more. There must be more. And while I love being your wife and I love, being a mom, I love being a auntie and a friend and a sister, the most fulfilling role that I get to operate in is in being a daughter of the king.
I have to say, my feelings got hurt once. I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna bring it out right now. We were married a few years. I think it was.
This was recently. This
No,
was in
no,
the
no, no,
past
no,
10
no,
years.
no. It was earlier than that. Well, we probably revisited again, but and when Renee said this to me, it hurt.
Just
And
know.
then and then
Let me just let me let,
you
let me
gotta
preface
set
it.
it
Let's
up.
set it up, okay? I'm a very direct communicator, and I am the oldest child, and so I have a lot of communication flaws. When it comes to
No.
operating in empathy, no, no. Let's be
Okay.
real.
Okay.
I have not always been gentle. I have not always been, and I still am not. I'm still working on that. So I had to learn that how to say things to Gil in a way where it would be beneficial and not hurt him.
So
And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
no, God has healed me.
Healing you.
But you think about this, when we were early in our marriage, and it hurt me because if anything, I would say that was a void in my identity, because you can start taking on a role or an identifiable thing that you'll start relying on as being the source of who you are.
Mhm.
And because that early in our relationship, Renee really needed me to validate some things in her as an individual because of self-esteem things.
Mhm.
And I work towards that because you always want to bring and be
Yeah.
that person for your person. And I was trying to do it. I was trying to validate and build her up and making a conscious
And
effort
he
to
did a
do
really
this.
good job.
And then Jesus came along, and Renee got uh, she is great in a lot of things, but and one thing I love about her, and I think is an admirable quality, is she goes all in really easy.
I don't play.
She pushing all of her chips to the center of the table, and she's doing it, and she's going all in.
And I ain't looking back.
She ain't skirting around the area. She ain't dipping her toe in the water to see. She's just jumping in. So she jumped in with Jesus. Can I say that?
Of course you can.
Okay. She jumped in with Jesus, and all of a sudden Jesus kind of started feeling their identity. And so she didn't need old Gil to kind of start doing that thing that he was doing for some years. And then she told Gil about that. Why am I talking in third person? Well, she told me about it, and it hurt when she says, you know what? I don't need Gil doesn't, just like what she was getting ready to say in that previous statement, I don't need Gil to fulfill me or to help me with my identity because Jesus and God does that. Well, guess what? When you've been doing something for a while with your significant other and you've been filling a role
that you're really not supposed to.
And we didn't know this at the time, but when she told me that, it was kind of like, ouch. Now all of a sudden you feel like you're not needed anymore, or what you were doing is invalid, or it wasn't, well, it wasn't all that, And then but when it was the way she presented it, and I can't even remember if it was in a conversation with someone, she was like, and maybe we were doing a teaching, and then it was like,
I want Gil. I want Gil.
I don't need him.
Gil.
That's enough to make you go,
what? In the chat, would you rather be wanted or needed?
Well, when she said it, and I thank God because I knew her heart and I knew what she meant because of the years we've been communicating and everything. And so when she said that, it was like, okay, I get it. I hear you. I know. I don't think
you still didn't get it then, though.
How many times did it take? But I would say my ego was a little bruised. I'll say it like that. It was because you have always do a really good job of building me up, even though there are times where I don't need it as much as Renee may have.
Because my love language is words of affirmation.
Right. And so when that happens and you start identifying with something that you're doing to help someone in their identity, that can become a part of your identity, as a fixer or a problem solver or someone.
They call it codependency.
Yeah. And so that's where the living the life of regret that you mentioned.
Codependency is when you do it at the expense of yourself.
And to help somebody keep continuing on in bad behavior. So when you do that, it will lead to some regrets that you have in the long term in your relationship. So that's what we're talking about this morning, is about your identity in yourself as an individual, but also your identity as in a couple, because that can actually have a big impact on who you are.
So don't do like we did. Your husband, your children, your marriage, your career cannot be the source of your identity. Because I was reading in Luke today, as much as I love being married, no one's going to be married in heaven. Your fulfillment and your enjoyment is going to come from your relationship with God. And so I think that's something in the back of your mind you have to remember, that while marriage is a beautiful gift that we get to enjoy in the earth, it's not eternal. That is not an eternal role or position. And so therefore we have to live for eternity. We have to be living each day thinking about, well, wait a minute, what's eternal? And so I think that when you live with eternity in mind, it keeps you from being so attached to and controlled by and consumed by things that are going to expire.
That time where you said that Romans 5:8 was always your life
verse.
Is. And I think that was one of the catalysts that really drove that. When you get a scripture and it really grabs your heart and you start living it out, you don't care about all the other stuff.
And one of the things I could say that Gil really helped me so much, and he is such an encourager, and he is, my biggest advocate and angel investor and best friend. And he gave me this book by Joyce Myers. It was actually, Valentine's is coming. Give your guy something that's gonna matter. And I'm not saying candy is important. But Gil gave me for Valentine's Day one year. It was by Joyce Myers. It was called Healing the Brokenhearted. It was a tape series. And you gave it to me and you said, I want you to see where you've come from. He said, I want you to have a reminder of where you've come from. And that meant a lot to me, that the person that's the closest to me, who knows me on my good days and my bad days and my strengths and my weaknesses, that he was able to say, here, I want you to see where you've come from. And so he's been a very instrumental part in me growing and maturing and becoming the best version of myself, because he gave me the freedom to not have to stay the same.
Mhm.
And
So that kind of leads you into the next question. We're talking about identity this morning and your relationship. Why is your identity essential to your growth?
well, because if you don't understand the source of your, okay, to where we always say people reap what they sow, but you also reap from where you sow too. So let's just say I make my, okay, let's say, because for a long time my identity was, and I didn't realize it until I stopped doing hair. Um, because I haven't done hair in like almost 8 years now. And when the Lord first asked me to stop, because I was like, well, dang, Lord, what's going on? I'm trying to go back, and I'm moving to a new place. We have opened salons in multiple cities over and over and over again. So I have a system. And so when we got to the point, we were in Louisiana and in Alabama, and I could not get a job doing hair, working in the salon. And I'm like, Lord, what's going on? This is too much opposition. And he was like, I gave you 28 years to do you. And so now I want you to do what I created you to do. And I didn't realize how much my identity was in, not just in doing hair, but how much money I made doing hair. And I would keep reminding the Lord, well, you know how much money I made doing that. And he was like, if you remind me one more time how much money you generated, um, it's going to take you longer to do that again. And so I began to find my identity in that. And so it's sometimes it takes for you to lose something for you to realize, oh man, that was my identity.
And that's big, especially with men, I believe. And I'm only speaking for me.
Yeah.
Other guys may feel different, but this is something that I struggled with early in my walk and even coming to Christ, or even before I came to Christ, because we are taught at such a young age,
get a job,
be a man.
Uh-huh.
That's a role. Now all of a sudden I'm a father. That's a role.
No, you were the head of the house before you were any of that.
That's a role. I go and give my life to Christ. Now I'm the head of the house. Now that's a role. I go on my vacation, and whether you're an employee or a supervisor or the CEO, that's a role.
You know what I love? Your identity cannot be in a role, because a role is going to move on.
Well, that's the point that I was kind of leading to, where with men, it becomes such a part of us that we still fall into this habit of, especially when you meet somebody new, one of the first questions you will ask them is, what do you do? Well, what do you do is a vocation, but a lot of times we'll be asking the question a little bit different from, who are you? Right. And the way you are answering that is by what you do. So if I say, well, I'm a retired military person, that's a part of my identity. I have embraced it as a part of who I am, but it really isn't.
It's your title.
It was my role, or as far as my vocational choice that I used to provide for my family. But all of a sudden I got a title that came in the form of a rank, and that made me identify as my rank. So when you left, and this was and I was just talking to one of the guys at work the other day about this, and I was explaining to him, that was hard, because the minute you leave a role, whether it's a CEO or have a rank in the military, or being a business owner, when you are being a boss, minute you leave that role, guess what? All that authority, all that responsibility, all those things that went along with that title and that role are gone. Yeah. So as that old saying goes, you go from being a hero to zero real quick. So if you were a big boss or whatever you did, you may have had a lot of clout, a lot of responsibility, right, made a lot of decisions, and did a lot of things that impacted a lot of people. Now all of a sudden you don't have that anymore.
Right.
And if that is a part of your identity, it can deliver a major blow to you. That's why it kind of goes back to Romans 5:8.
Yeah, while we were yet still in sin, Jesus died for us. And the reason why that was important to me was because growing up, and I think even going back, even being younger, it's like it becomes the approval of your parents. Mm-hmm. You identify with, okay, well, I'm a good girl, or I'm a bad boy, or I'm the favorite. I'm not the favorite, And so there's so many things that we can find our identity in. And the reason why it's so important to our growth is because until your identity is in something that is eternal
and bigger than you and
and bigger than
outside of
you and
you.
outside of you and not based on your performance, because my role as a daughter of the King of Kings, I'm going to be that eternally.
You know, it's funny that you can make a choice and that choice becomes your identity, but yet that can be the
Because
downfall
you
to
can
who
change
you
your
are,
choice.
because you can change your choice or change your
Right.
mind with about anything, you know, whether I live in this certain place or move to this certain place or take this certain job, or even when you have personal choices and decisions that you make. Maybe you made a mistake, but then all of a sudden that
We
has
become
become a
that
part.
mistake.
Yeah, you become a part of a choice and a decision where you have to say, well, sometimes it's hard to undo that thing,
Yeah.
you know, but that's what
But
kind of
we're
goes
not
back
our
to,
good or our bad
and
choices.
I'll go back to what you wrote in the book. That's why you being more than enough is so important. You want to talk
Yeah.
about that?
I love that. The reason why I came up with that was because when you look at it at the root of what is that we all need,
Mm-hmm.
what's the most important human need? And it's to
Acceptance.
belong.
Yeah.
It's to belong. And so at the root of the things that we struggle with, it's so I am more than enough in Christ Jesus. That's the whole thing.
That's got to be first.
I have enough. I belong to I have enough stuff. I don't how does it go?
I'm more than
I'm
enough.
more than
I
enough in
have
Christ
enough stuff.
Jesus. I have enough. I
And
know when to say no.
I know when to say enough is enough.
I know when to say enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the last one?
You are more than
And
enough.
you are more than enough. Because so many times we find our identity in our stuff. So no, you have enough stuff. You don't need no more stuff. You know when to say enough is enough, because we have to know how to say no to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So a part of that, the enoughness of God, is knowing that the most important thing in our life is our relationship with God. And what does that look like on a daily basis? Before I do anything, the first thing I do is spend time with God in the morning. Because how can he be your priority if you don't spend time with him?
If it's your second or third choice.
And
Mm-hmm.
and also there's 7 days in a week. So if I only spend time with God on Sunday at church, what if we did that with
with your significant other?
Yeah,
You only
or
spend.
let's just use your body. What if you only ate once a week?
Mm-hmm.
We would be cut up and we'd be sick too.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to make sure that if God is really our priority and if he's the source of my identity, I need to go to him every day so that he can erase all those negative things that I was told growing up, undo all, the pain of my past. And I have to be willing to really sit with it and ask some real hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a part of it is understanding that who is she? The only person that can really tell you who you are is God.
And that kind of makes me think about Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed
to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
And the reason why that is so important, because before you get to the point of where you are in your life to knowing who you are, that tells me that I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. I'm going to make some bad choices along the way. I'm going to make some decisions along the way that are not going to be the best. And if I have adopted those things as my identity,
right,
it can do some real damage. But if when I accept and I look for my identity in Christ, and he tells me when I read Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and you can read it on through.
Yeah.
When he tells me I have to don't be conformed to this world that we live in by making choices and decisions that kind of go along with it, but also I have to renew my mind.
Yeah.
That tells me that there are bad things that I have ingrained into my thinking and into my head that I may be manifesting out in my life.
Well, that you will manifest.
That need to be changed.
Right.
But then you have to ask yourself, where is that change coming from?
Right.
And if it's coming from society, you're in this vicious circle of I'm not to be conformed, but I'm being changed by the world. So I'm stuck on this wheel of doing the same thing, being changed and transformed by the very thing that I'm trying to get away from.
And then think about it though, but are you really changing? Because one of the things I remember this person said, growth is when you are doing something different every day. You're stuck when you're living the same day. So it's
over and over
again. So I'm having a different day every day. So I'm growing and I'm changing, I'm being transformed. But when you are not growing and being transformed. You're doing the same day every day over and over. So it's been 12 years of the same day.
And so if has been a part of your identity, you wrote something also in the book. Identity plus purpose equals your mission.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are stuck in a position or in a place of not knowing who your identity is, you're going to be asking yourself those questions. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody ever asked that? Have you ever asked yourself? Have you ever asked that question? Because I did.
Yeah,
I asked it a lot. I asked it a lot for a lot of years of who am I? I was basically looking for a role. I was looking for something to identify with, and when I didn't find it, or I adopted maybe some other things like being in the military or being in a particular job before I joined the military, that's what I embraced, or that's what I held on to. And when I did that, and if I started identifying with that, then and that really wasn't my purpose, because only the originator of who created you can tell you what your purpose is.
Right.
And if your purpose is not identified by you, by God, then how can you rightfully do what he created you to do?
Right.
Which means you're going to be off mission. In the military, we call it off mission. You don't get off mission no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what, you fulfill your mission. You accomplish your task. And only way you're going to know that is by you having a full identifiable role of knowing who you are in Christ first.
Right.
Then by that happening, he's going to tell you what your purpose is. And when you know what your purpose is, now you can execute your mission.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to share is one of the biggest traps or enemies to purpose and mission is the enemy. Because I was telling Gil today, I was presented with an opportunity. And when the enemy presents you with an opportunity, it's going to attract your inner child, the part of you that was hurt and that has not necessarily been healed. And you have to be careful that you know the difference between the adult you and the child you.
The hurt you.
The hurt child. Because there's a hurt child in most of us. I mean, if that's not your story, then praise God, I'm happy. But most of us have a wounded child inside of us that needs to be healed. And so when the enemy comes to us, a lot of times he comes to us through that brokenness. And so we have to know what our brokenness is. And for mine, it was rejection. It was abandonment. It was thrust with adult responsibilities as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And so with a lot of those areas of brokenness, you have to know what they are. You have to know how they're going to manifest in your life, because I had to exchange, and I had to go back and revisit all of those things. I had to spend the time to say, oh, well, why do I think like that? Well, why do I think all women are bad? Well, because my mom, we had a horrible relationship. But you can't blame everyone for what one person did. And so I had to go back and it's not
revisit some stuff
and undig it up and unearth it and face it.
And that statement is so true, that adulthood is the time we spend getting over our childhood, healing from our childhood.
And for some people, childhood can be your best memories in life, and that's a blessing.
And now but
for some of us,
it wasn't.
Childhood is where we
are trying to
experience our most trauma, and we're trying to get over that. But the reality of it is that you're going to go through difficulty, trauma, whether you're an adult or a child. No one is going to be exempt from difficulty and trauma and the pain of your past. Everyone, your past may be yesterday, my past may be 10 years ago, but we're all going to have pain in our past. And so a part of really developing a healthy, strong identity is to focus on your relationship with God.
It's simple. The answer is easy.
Yeah, it is.
Romans 5:8.
Yeah.
What is it?
While I was yet still in sin, Jesus died for me.
So if you're struggling with the identity part, God already gave us the answer. Yeah. Romans chapter 5.
And the thing that I love about that verse, because for me, I grew up in an environment where it was very performance oriented. And so for me, I realized that God loved me whether I did good or bad, whether I was, whether my room was clean or dirty, whether I had an A or an F. And so for me, that was the first time I experienced that. I saw it in the Word, and that Gil I was watching the interview, and she was talking about her husband and how kind. The reason why I was so attracted to Gil, yeah, he's fine. I mean, yes, he is fine. But it was the kindness. It was that he saw me. He was the first person, you like my Aunt Dee Dee. I know she loved me. She adored me. And I appreciate that. But she's been in my life my whole life. And so she's biased. But for a stranger to come into your life and to really see you, and I think that's the thing that, because we were talking about it this morning, what attracts you to someone, and Gil, he'll probably share that next week. I'll let him share that next week when he talks. But I think you're attracted to its chemistry, but the origin of chemistry is more than just the way that they look, it's the way they make you feel.
I'm gonna write it down. What she alluded to was you're attracted to your deficiencies. But we're gonna talk about that next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. But I just want you all to know that we love you guys, and we are so grateful that we get to spend this time together, come
Hanging out with you.
together, hang out with you, share our life with you. Um, we have had a past, and we've had pain, and we've had difficulty, and
Mhm.
we have heartache, and we have good things to happen and bad things to happen. But we make a choice every day to choose the things that are good and pure and lovely and of good report. Does that mean that everything is good and pure and lovely? No, it's not. It means that I choose to focus on what's good and pure and lovely. And
Mhm.
so my identity is not in anything that I can achieve or perform. I can't buy it, I can't earn it, and I don't deserve it. But it's from Christ. And so that's something that we can all have.
Yep.
And so
So we
hope you
appreciate you
guys.
guys hanging out with us. We If you enjoy something, you got something out of it, share with other people. We're gonna jump
Yeah.
around. We've been jumping around with times and things like that, trying to find the best opportune time for everyone because we
We
know we
think
got
about
people.
Saturday night would be good.
Well, we're gonna try that next.
Yeah.
So be looking out for the little post in the community that we're
Yes.
gonna try to figure out what's best for you. So if you watching this later on, we appreciate you
We
guys
love
hanging out
you.
with you. Thank you for your investment in time. We appreciate you. Click the like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. Share with people who you think this will actually benefit. So if you didn't really get anything out of it, maybe you know somebody who did and
Yeah.
they need to hear
And tell us
something a
how we
little
can
bit
get
different.
better. Tell us how we can better
And
serve
tell
you.
us
Put that
what
in
you
the
want to talk.
comments.
Yeah, and tell us what you
Yeah.
want to talk about. So we appreciate you guys. We love you guys, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yes, we will. Love you. You're more than enough. Bye.